A little late today. There's the practical of running a business. Well, or having a business run me. and so I was caught up in some of the practical stuff for the last little while. And so here we are. We're going to read, though. I mean, I really am enjoying doing this. This is just for those of you that are tuning in right now. We're reading from Dr. David Hawkins, Letting Go. I love the book. It's consciousness building. You know, awareness is power, and awareness is the beginning of change, and awareness is the beginning of expansion, and you know, so this is a self-awareness and consciousness that we're reading in. Yesterday we started chapter 4, apathy and depression. So he's starting in his scale from the bottom and kind of working up. And apathy is really at the bottom of the scale. It's like his scale goes from 0 to 1,000, 1,000 being like Christ consciousness, and you know, apathy being, I say, so low that a snake's asshole looks like a star. That's terrible, I know, but it's low. It's like holy shit, you know, life is hopeless, and when we're in apathy, and he describes that, and you know, none of us want to stay there long, and any of us that have done, you know, really been fully engaged in life have been there, you know, in those places, those dark places, and there's certainly a motivation to come out of those places. And Hawkins has been an inspiration to me. I started reading Hawkins in 2007, and actually traveled with his books, and you know, slept with his books. They're very high vibration. I mean, I used to read them and sleep with them. I don't mean, you know what I mean. So here we go. If you haven't got a copy yet, you can order it from us online, and eventually, I've been after Earl. Eventually, we're going to have a list of you know, kind of David's picks of books, and to support you in finding some great books for what I call lifelong learning, and you know, the more we, you know, the more we kind of grow, the more we have to give away, and the more consciousness we experience, the more contented, the more peace we find within ourselves. And I mean, my imagining is that that's what you want, is to find a level of peace, to live with peace, to live, you know, complete inside of this container. And but it is just a container. That the real you, the real me, is not the body. It's not the ego. It's you know, the spiritual being that we connect with, and then we feel peace. Okay. We're on page 51, and at the bottom of page 51 is the like a subtitle. It's I can't versus I won't. Another way out of apathy is to look at the payoff we are getting out of the apathetic attitudes. So what are we getting from being apathetic? The payoff may be in the face-saving excuses to cover what up is actually fear. Since in reality, we're very capable beings, most I can'ts are really I won'ts. Behind the I can'ts, the I won'ts is frequently a fear. Then when we look at the truth of what is behind the feeling, we have already moved up the scale from apathy to fear. Fear is a higher energy state than apathy. Fear at least begins to motivate us into action. And in that action, we can again surrender fear and move up to anger and pride or courage, all of which are higher states than apathy. Just hang on a second. We have company. Hi. So we do have company, but I think they realized we were reading, and they're just going to let us continue. Let's take a typical human problem and trace how the mechanism of surrender works to free us from an inhibition. Public speaking is one of the most common inhibitions. On the level of apathy in this arena, we say, oh, I can't possibly speak in public. It is way too overwhelming. Nobody wants to hear me anyway. Nobody wants to hear me anyway. I don't have anything worth saying. This is apathy talking. If we remind ourselves of our intention, we'll see that the apathy is merely covering up fear. Now, the thought of speaking in public is frightening, not hopeless. Thus brings about a certain clarity. The facts are not that we can't, merely that we are afraid. Nice. As the fear comes up and is let go, we become aware of the fact that we have a desire to do the very thing that we fear. Now, when looking at the desire, which is blocked by fear and perhaps compounded by some grief or loss, or some grief, over lost opportunities in the past, anger arises. At this point, we're already moved from apathy to grief to desire and up to anger. Anger is a higher vibration. Nice. Anger gets things done. Anger gets us moving. And in anger, there's much more energy and capacity for action. Anger often takes the form of resentment, such as resentment that we agreed to the public speaking and now feel obligated to do it. I have had that. It's like, holy shit. I think a little bit of fear of public speaking is acceptable. I have it less because I've been practicing and doing it quite a bit, but I get kind of excited now about public speaking and the opportunity to carry a message. Anyway, enough of me. There's always anger about our fear. There's also anger about our fear, which has blocked accomplishment in the past. Yeah, I get that. And the anger leads to a decision to do something about it. This decision might take the form of a public speaking course. Nice. I did that. Dale Carnegie years ago. It was great. I really recommend it. The Carnegie program is freaking awesome. We are already, when we sign up for the public speaking course, we are already moved to the energy of pride in that we have finally taken the bull by the horns and are doing something about it. On the way to the speaking course, again, more fear will arise. As this is constantly acknowledged and surrendered, we become aware that we have courage, in our capacity at least, to face our fears and take action to overcome them. Hoorah! Courage, action. Going to get Earl a pair of leather, soled shoes. You can hear him tapping in out of the back. He's sitting over there. And he's also looking after stuff on the floor, I think. Anyway, the level of courage has a lot of energy. That energy takes the form of letting go of residual fear, anger, and desire, so that in the middle of the speaking class, we suddenly experience acceptance. With acceptance, there's the freedom from resistance, which has taken the form previously of fear, apathy, and anger. Wow. Now we begin to experience pleasure. There is the self-confidence of acceptance. I can do it. On the level of acceptance, there's a greater awareness of others, so that in our speaking class, we become aware of the pain, suffering, and embarrassment of others in the class and begin to be concerned about them. The Carnegie class was so great for that. I remember I did the Dale program, which was in public speaking, and it was amazing for that. And then the Carnegie sales program was awesome. That was years and years ago, but I really recommend that. Part of my lifelong learning. With the emergence of these, with this compassion towards others, there's a loss of self-consciousness. There's a loss of self-consciousness. With the emergence of the selflessness comes moments of peace. That's why I encourage service as one of the pillars here of everything that we're talking about. Because when we're serving others, we kind of forget about ourselves, and when we forget about ourselves, we have moments of peace. On the way home from the class, we experience an inner contentment, a feeling that we have grown, that we have shared with others. In the experience of sharing, we've forgotten ourselves for a few moments and have been more concerned with the happiness of someone else. We take pleasure in the accomplishments of others. In this state, there's a transforming grace, the discovery of our inner compassion, a feeling of connectedness with others, and a compassion for their suffering. With the full development of this progression, we might then share with others how we had fear of public speaking and the steps we took to overcome it, and the success we experienced, the increase of our self-esteem, and the positive change in our relationships. Pretty cool, eh? Progressing out of like I can do it, to all the way to wow, I've helped others do it. It's beautiful. The entire progression is the basis of a great deal of the power of self-help groups. Yes, the sharing of inner experiences from the lowest to the highest levels on the scale of emotions. That which in the beginning seemed formidable, overwhelming, has now become surmountable and handled, with a resilient increase in aliveness and well-being. This increase in self-esteem then spills over into other areas of life, and the increase in confidence results in greater material abundance and capacity in functioning, vocational functioning. So it makes us better at work or whatever we do. That's awesome. On this level, love takes the form of sharing and encouraging others, and our activities are constructive instead of destructive. The energy radiated out is then positive and attractive to others, resulting in a constant positive feedback. Yes! Which is, again, helps build our self-esteem and our confidence, and we just feel better about ourselves. Once we've experienced the progression up the scale of emotions in any particular area, we now begin to realize that it can be done in other areas of limitation in our lives. Behind all of the I can'ts are merely I won'ts. Damn, eh? And I won'ts mean I'm afraid to, or I'm ashamed to. I have too much pride to try, for fear I might fail. Behind that anger, that is anger at ourselves and the circumstances engaged ourselves in the circumstance engendered by pride. Acknowledging and letting go of our feelings brings us to the courage, and with that, finally acceptance and an inner peacefulness, at least as it regards to the area which has been surmounted. That's cool. Apathy and depression are the prices we pay for having settled for and bought into our smallness. It's what we get for having played the victim and allowed ourselves to be programmed. It's the price we pay for having bought into negativity. It's what results from resisting the part of ourselves that is loving, courageous, and great. It results from allowing ourselves to be invalidated by others or ourselves. It is the consequence of holding ourselves in a negative context. In reality, it is only a definition of ourselves that we have. It is only a definition of ourselves that we have unwittingly allowed to happen. The way out is to become more conscious. Nice. That's what we're doing here. That's the whole reason we're reading this book, David Hawkins, is to be more conscious. Not only for you, but for me. It's an amazing read, and this is several times I've been through this, and I don't know whatever possessed me to do it publicly, but here we are doing it publicly. And now I think, once we're into this book, there's other books I'd love to read on a regular basis, and we'll see if how you guys like this. Way out. Okay, the way out is to become more conscious. What does it mean to become more conscious? To begin with, becoming more conscious means to start looking for the truth for ourselves. Instead of blindly allowing ourselves to be programmed, whether from without or by our inner voice within the mind, which seeks to diminish and invalidate, focusing on all that is weak and helpless. To get out of it, we have to accept the responsibility that we have brought into the negativity and have been willing to believe it. We have bought into the negativity and been willing to believe it. The way out of this, then, is to start questioning everything. Yes. I know in the 12-step world, they say we only have to change one thing. That's everything. And so we have to start questioning everything. There are many models of the mind, many models of the mind. One of the most recent has been that of the computer. We can look at the mind's concepts, thoughts, and belief systems as programs because they are programs. They can be questioned, canceled, reversed. Positive programs can replace negative ones if we so choose. The smaller aspect of ourselves is very willing to accept negative programming. If we look at the source of our thoughts, begin to identify their origins, and stop the vanity of labeling them as mine, and therefore circumstant, I don't know what that word means, SACROSANCT, circumstant. Not sure what the word means, but it's a description of the idea that we've labeled some belief as mine. We become attached to it. We become identified with it. We notice that thoughts can be looked at objectively. We see that their origins were often the early childhood training from parents, family, and teachers, as well as dribbles and drabbles of information we picked up from playmates, newspapers, movies, television, radio, church, novels, and the automatic input from our senses. All of this went on unwittingly within our having experienced unwittingly without our having experienced any conscious choice. Not only that, but out of our unconsciousness and ignorance and innocence, naivety, plus the nature of our mind itself, we ended up as the composite of all the negative garbage prevalent in the world. We ended up as the composite of all the negative garbage prevalent in the world. Furthermore, we concluded that it applied to us personally. As we become more aware, we begin to realize that we have a choice. We can stop giving authority to all of our mind's thoughts, begin to question them, and find out if there's really any truth in them for ourselves. So it's a process of consciousness. I love it. The feeling state of apathy is associated with the belief I can't. The mind doesn't like to hear it, but in reality, most I can'ts are I won'ts. The reason the mind doesn't want to hear this is because I can't is a for our feelings. These feelings can be brought to awareness by posing the hypothetical question to oneself. Is it true that I won't rather than I can't? If I accept that I won't, what situations will be brought up and how do I feel about them? As an example, let's say we have a belief system that we can't dance. I can't dance. I can dance. Anyway, that we can't dance. We say to ourselves, perhaps that's a cover-up. Maybe the truth is that I don't want to, and I won't. The way we can find out what the feelings are is to envision ourselves as going through the process of learning to dance. As we do that, all of the associated feelings now start to come up. Embarrassment, pride, awkwardness, the sheer effort of learning a new skill, the reluctance about the time and energy involved. As we replace I can't with I won't, we uncover all of these feelings which can be surrendered. We see that learning to dance means we have to be willing to let go of pride. We look at the cost and ask ourselves, am I willing to continue to pay this price? Would I be willing to let go of the fear of not succeeding? Would I be willing to let go of resisting the effort required? Would I be willing to let go of the vanity so that I would allow myself to be awkward as a learner? Could I let go of the stinginess and smallness for not being willing to pay for the lessons? That's interesting, isn't it? And give the time. As all of the associated feelings are surrendered, it becomes very clear that the real reason is unwillingness, not incapacity. We can all dance, baby. That's right. And but some of us won't. Isn't it funny when we're kids, and go to the high school dance, and the boys are on one side and the girls on the other, and nobody wants to dance. And I love to dance. I've always been a dancer, so often would have to dance with all the girls because their guys wouldn't dance with them. But I think me being on the floor dancing made it easier for lots of guys to do it because I'm pretty awkward. Anyway, I digress. Must be remembered that we are free to acknowledge and surrender our feelings. That we are free to acknowledge and surrender our feelings. And we are free not to surrender. As we examine our I can'ts and find out they are really I won'ts, it doesn't mean that we have to let go of the negative feelings that result in the I won'ts. We are perfectly free to refuse to let go. We are free to hang on to our negativity as long as I want. Yeah, we're free to hang on to the negativity as long as I want. There is no law that says we have to give it up. We are free agents. But it makes a big difference in our self-concept to realize that I won't do something. There's quite a different feeling from than to think that I am a victim and I can't. For instance, we can choose to hate somebody if we want. We can choose to blame them. We can choose to blame circumstances. But being more conscious and realizing that we are freely choosing this attitude puts us in a higher state of consciousness and, therefore, closer to greater power and mastery than being the helpless victim and of the feeling. So choice is that's a big deal. So I think I started back here on 51. Should I read on a little bit more? How long have we gone, Earl?
Keep going.
Keep
going.
Keep going. Keep going. Okay. The next subtitle on page 58 is blame, and this is all part of apathy and depression. You know, I think the consciousness, you know, lifelong learning and consciousness that comes with it is so important, and then meditation is the super drug that, you know, allows us to drop into that space and past the thoughts, you know, that torment us, and learning what the thoughts are and how the feelings, you know, are related to the thoughts is, I think, super duper important. So okay, we'll read a couple more pages. Blame. One of the biggest blocks to overcoming getting out of depression and apathy is that of blame. Blame is a whole subject in itself. Looking into it is rewarding. Looking into it is rewarding. To begin with, there are a lot of payoffs to blame. We get to be innocent. Yeah, heck with them, it's their fault. We get to enjoy self-pity. We get to be the martyr, the victim. We get to be the recipient of sympathy. Perhaps the biggest payoff of blame is that we get to be the innocent victim and the other party is the bad one. We see this game played out in the media constantly, such as the endless blame games dramatized in the multitude of controversies, mudslinging, and character assassinations and lawsuits. In addition to the emotional payoff, blame has a considerable financial benefit. Therefore, it is a tempting package to be the innocent victim. It is often financially rewarding. That's right, we reward victims. There is a famous example of this in the New York City many years ago. A public conveyance, that would be like a bus, a public or you know, a train, public conveyance accident occurred. People poured out at the front door of the vehicle, then gathered in a small group furnishing their names and addresses for future financial benefit. Standbyers quickly caught on to the game and secretly climbed into the back of the vehicle so that they could emerge from the front as injured, innocent victims. Oh my gosh. They hadn't even been in the accident, but they were going to collect a reward. Isn't that crazy? That would be a hard one to live with, I think. Blame is the world's greatest excuse. It enables us to remain limited and small without feeling guilty. But there is a cost, a loss of our freedom. Also, the role of the victim brings with it a self-perception of weakness, vulnerability, and helplessness, which are the major components of apathy and depression. And I think that, you know, illness is caused from living in the victim. I think that it's so much of our illness is psychosomatic, and so the price we pay of the victim is to often be sick in our body and sick in our mind. Well, certainly victims are not happy. That's my opinion. The first step out of the blame is to see that we are choosing to blame. Other people who have had similar circumstances have forgotten, and handled the same situation in a totally different way. We earlier saw the case of Viktor Frankl, who chose to forgive the Nazi prison guards and see a hidden gift in his experience in the concentration camps. Boy, I've been hearing a lot about his books, and how Frankl was actually in like 6 or 7 different prison camps. Amazing story. Last night in my men's group we were talking about. Because others, such as Frank, have chosen not to blame, that option is also open to us. We have to be honest and realize that we are blaming because we choose to blame. This is true no matter how justified the circumstances may appear to be. It is not a matter of right or wrong. It is merely a matter of taking responsibility for our own consciousness. It is totally different. It is a totally different situation to see that we choose to blame rather than to think we have to blame. In this circumstance, the mind often thinks, well, if the other person or event is not to blame, then I must be. Blaming others or ourselves is simply not necessary. So, he's about to go into depth of that. Just because we're not blaming somebody else doesn't mean that we're at fault. Fault doesn't always have to be there. The attraction of blame arises in early childhood as a daily occurrence in the classroom, playground, and home among siblings. Blame is a central issue in the endless court proceedings and lawsuits that characterize our society. In truth, blame is just another one of the negative programs that we have allowed our mind to buy because we never stop to question it. Why must something always be someone's fault? Why must the whole concept of wrong be introduced to the situation in the first place? Why must one of us be wrong, bad, or at fault? It seems like a good idea at the time. It seems like a good idea at the time may not have turned out so well. That's all. Oh, I see, yeah. Unfortunately, events may have just happened. To overcome blame, it is necessary to look at the secret satisfaction and enjoyment we get out of self-pity, resentment or anger or self-excuses, and to begin to surrender all of these little payoffs. The purpose of this step is to move up from being a victim of our feelings to choosing to have them. If we merely acknowledge and observe them, begin to disassemble them, and surrender the component parts, then we are consciously exercising choice. In this way, we make a major move out of the morass of helplessness and victim. It is helpful to overcome resistance and taking responsibility for our negative programs and feelings, to see that they come from the small aspect of ourselves. It is the very nature of the smallest part of ourselves to think negatively. Hello. Isn't that great? Okay, let me start over again. It is helpful in overcoming resistance and taking responsibility for our negative programs and feelings to see that they come from the small aspect of ourselves. It is the very nature of the smallest part of ourselves to think negatively. So there's an unconscious tendency to agree readily to its limited viewpoint. But that is not the whole of our beingness. That is not the whole of our beingness. For outside and beyond the smaller self is the greater self. We may not be conscious of our inner greatness. We may not be experiencing it, but it is there. When we let go of our resistance to it, we can begin to experience it. Depression and apathy, therefore, result from the willingness to hang on to the small self and its belief system, plus the resistance to our higher self, which consists of all the opposites of the negative feelings. Um, Earl, I don't think that she's aware that we. Did you tell her already? Okay, great. About the 60? Okay, great. So you know what I was thinking. It is the nature of the universe that everything in it is represented by its equal and opposite. Thus, the electron's equal and opposite is the positron, and every force has an equal and opposite counterforce. Yin is compensated for by yang. There is fear, but there is also courage. There is hatred, but there's also love. There's timidity, but there's also bravery. There is stinginess, but there's also generosity. In the human psyche, every feeling has its opposite. The way out of negativity is, therefore, the willingness to acknowledge and let go of negative feelings, and at the same time, the willingness to let go of resisting their positive opposites. Right? So we've been not only living small, but we've been resisting living big. That hurts. Yeah, that's so good. Mm-hmm. Depression and apathy are the result of being at the effect of the negative polarity. How does this work in everyday life? Let's look at the example of someone's birthday that is approaching quickly. Because of things that have happened in the past, we have resentments and feel unwilling to do anything for the birthday. Somehow, it somehow it just seems impossible to get out and shop for the birthday present. We resent having to spend the money. And the mind conjures up all kinds of justifications. I don't have time to shop. I can't forget how mean she was. She should apologize to me first. In this case, two things are operating: clinging to the negativity and the smallness in ourselves, and resisting the positive and the greatness in ourselves. The way out of apathy is to see, first of all, that I can't. That I can't is an I won't. It's in looking at the I won't, we see that it is there because of negative feelings, and they come up. They can be acknowledged and let go of. It is also apparent that we are resisting positive feelings. These feelings of love, generosity, and forgiveness can be looked at one by one. Nice, positive feelings. We sit down. How are we doing with power juice?
We're at 16%.
Okay, good. I'm going to read just one more page. We sit down and imagine the quality of generosity and let go resisting it. Is there something generous within ourselves? In this case, we may not be willing to apply it to the birthday person in the beginning. That we can begin to see, what we can begin to see is the existence of such a quality as generosity within our consciousness. We begin to see that as we let go resisting the feeling of generosity, there is generosity. We do in fact enjoy giving to others. Under certain circumstances, we begin to remember the positive flood of feelings that comes upon us when we express gratitude and acknowledge the gifts that others have given us. We see that we have really been suppressing a desire to forgive, and we let go of the resistance by being forgiving. There emerges the willingness to let go of the grievance. As we do this, we can identify with our small self, and begin consciously aware that there's something in us that is greater. It is always there, but hidden from view. If you're just tuning in, we're reading from David Hawkins' Letting Go. It's an amazing book, and you can get a copy. I think we have a link on either this podcast or this or our past ones. They're all there. This process, it's always there but hidden from view. This process is applicable in all negative situations. It enables us to change the context by which we perceive our current situation. It enables us to give it a new and different meaning. It lifts us up from being the helpless victim to the conscious chooser. In the example given, it doesn't mean that we have to rush out and buy a birthday gift, but it does mean that we are now aware that we are in our current position out of choice. We have total freedom, with greater latitude of action and choice. It's a much higher state of consciousness than the helpless victim who is trapped by a past resentment. One of the laws of consciousness is we are only subject to a negative thought or belief if we consciously say it applies to us. That was in italics. One of the laws of consciousness is we are only subject to a negative thought or belief if we consciously say that it applies to us. There you go. So we have choice. We're free to choose not to buy into a negative belief system. How does this work in everyday life? Let's take a common example. The newspapers reports unemployment at a record high. The television commentator says there's no jobs are available. At this point, we are free to refuse to buy into the negative thought. We can say instead, unemployment does not apply to me. By refusing to accept the negative belief, we now has no hold over our own life. Examples from personal experience reveal that during periods of high unemployment, such as after World War II, there was no problem getting a job. As a matter of fact, one could have 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, like a dishwasher, or waiter, or bellhop, or cab driver, or bartender, or factory worker, or greenhouse worker, or window washer. These were the consequence of a belief system this was the consequence of a belief system that said unemployment applies to others, but not to me. Where there's a will, there's a way. There was also a willingness to relinquish pride in return for unemployment, or relinquish pride in return for employment. And the pride I think he's referring to is that maybe some of us might have thought some of those jobs were below us. But, getting in the field is where it happens. I believe that if you're working somewhere, your job is to find a better job. Maybe. I've heard that anyway. And not you, Earl. This is the best job. After explaining, another example, is that of a belief system having to do with that epidemic disease. A few years ago, 14 acquaintances were observed closely during an epidemic of the flu. Of the 14 people, 8 came down with the flu, but 6 did not. What is important here is that not that 8 people came down with the flu, but that 6 did not. In any epidemic, there are people who do not catch it. Even during the depths of the Depression, there were still people who became wealthy and even millionaires. The thought of poverty was catching in those days, but somehow these people did not buy into it. Therefore, it did not apply to them. For negativity to apply in your life, you must first subscribe to it, and secondly, give it energy of belief. If we have the power to make negativity manifest in our life, obviously our mind also has the power to make it the converse come true. Awesome. The next subtitle is Choosing the Positive, and we're going to do that tomorrow. It's tomorrow. No, today's Friday. My gosh, the whole week has gone by. So Monday, we're going to read again on Monday. Tomorrow, Saturday, we've got an exciting day here. We've got Tina Parsons coming in. She's a child psychologist, and she's going to do a group at 10 o'clock in the morning with parents and kids around meditation. And, I think you're never too young to meditate. You're never too old to meditate. And meditation is a practice and a discipline. And it's a beautiful practice and discipline. And like a lot of the teachers that have come here have said that after years of meditation, they can drop into that space almost at will, in a breath. And that's where you want to get to, where you drop into that space. But I think having a meditation space to do it in, and being kind of religious about it or disciplined about it on a regular basis helps you get there to that land of peace, freedom. So thanks for listening, and you can pick this book up online, follow the links, and love you guys so much. And again, thanks so much, and we'll talk soon. Cheers. Have a great weekend.